Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nails and Beauty Talk. I am your host, Asia the Bird. To have a very special guest with me today. She is an artist and an educator. Please welcome KB Mercer. Hello, KB.
Um,
Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm super happy to be interviewed, so I'm looking forward to this. So.
Yeah, you're most welcome. But I definitely want to kick off and ask by, just tell us about where you're from and tell us about your upbringing.
Okay, so I am from Clinton, Maryland. It's like a small town in Prince George's County.
Hmm.
Um, I would say my upbringing was pretty community centered. I had an extended family that really took over like helping with raising, and they exposed me to a lot of things. So like my parents, they were the children that kind of came up in the civil rights era. So they were the ones that integrated schools. And I believe that pretty much had a huge influence on my childhood. It made
Hmm.
me emphasis on education and history, and just really pushing us the kids and the community to dream bigger. So I'm really happy. I had a very peaceful childhood, I would say,
Hmm.
and it definitely played a role in how I treat my students and how I approach my work. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Now, how'd you get started into art? Like, what attracted you to art?
So I've always loved art, especially as a kid. It was just something I did just for fun.
Hmm.
Um, I guess when got to about like middle school age, so maybe about 11,
Hmm.
I didn't really think of art as like a career until that point
Right.
where this lady, she was like a mentor. She really pushed my mom and me to like apply for a community performing arts program.
Right.
So when I applied to perform, I didn't do it right away, but when I got to around high school, I
Hmm.
applied to this performing arts school in Suitland, and that really
Right.
just opened up like the world to me of what art could look like in different fields. So that hooks me, and I've been into art ever since.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I got into
Yeah,
art, like, when I was, like, in 2nd grade. I was
really.
like, I don't see myself doing anything else besides, making art, so, once I got into art class, I was hooked. I was like, "Oh, you have more freedom instead of, like, the typical social studies, math, and everything like that."
Yeah, and I think in my community, it wasn't really like, my parents, again, they came from that era. So the only thing they really knew
Mhm.
at that time was just, education and those types of fields.
Right.
So it was a little limiting, but, or
Mhm.
art, well, I won't say limited. Art just showed up differently. Like it wasn't a
Right.
gallery. And they didn't really know much about graphics and those types of
Mhm.
things. So it was more so about, selling your work at art markets. So when I
Right.
saw art, or being an art teacher, so when I saw art, it was always kind of those paths
Right.
until I got to Suitland, where it was you can be, if you like art and science, you could be a medical illustrator in all of these
Right,
different
right.
avenues. So
Mhm.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I find interesting because like certain schools like, Cleveland Institute of Art, like CIA and
Hmm.
SCAD, like, some of the schools kind of offer those different, types of illustrations. So it's not just like, comics or like,
Hmm.
children's book illustration. It's different types of illustrations you can dive into,
Yeah.
especially medical illustration. I think CIA
Hmm.
offers that. And from what I've heard from my understanding, like with scientific illustration, you go to like maybe like a surgeon, you actually draw like the anatomy, the body parts.
Yes, and it's requires a lot of other skills, which I think that we don't really
Mhm.
think about when we talk about art. That's really what I push for my own students. Like you have to, if you have more than one passion, and but you really enjoy art, you can merge all of those things into one thing. So like
Right,
even when we're talking about science, if you really love science, you don't have to let go of your art just so
right.
you can pursue science. You can bring all of those things together. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Now, who would you consider to be like your favorite artist?
So it's a loaded question. So I would say, like, I guess when I think of it's so many, but when I think of my favorite artists, I think I would think of like eras. And I think for
Mhm.
me, my favorite era of art was like right after the Harlem Renaissance in
Mhm.
that 30s and 40s, where those kids were the kids that were exposed to the art in the Harlem Renaissance. So you're getting to
Mhm.
see like them kind of, you get to see how they saw blackness
Right.
And I really just enjoy seeing how blackness looked like in that
Mhm.
time. And I also, but I will say one artist, Barnett Honeywood. She's not an artist
Mhm.
that's well known, but everybody
Mhm.
has seen her. She
Right.
is one of those artists that you see on TV, like her artwork just kind of hanging in the background. And I
Mhm.
think that style, like that art, and seeing that art in a home is what
Mhm.
really I just really take from that, and it really resonates with me. So I just love
Mhm.
Barnett Honeywood and just the artists from like the Great Migration era, like right after the Harlem Renaissance.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really, really cool. Yeah, I gravitated towards like Jean-Michel Basquiat because like with his work,
Mm.
like I love how abstract it is, but also
Mhm.
too like, I love how free he was with what he was expressing, especially about certain issues, especially involving, blackness, you know,
Mhm.
and that's kind of the same thing. That's really the same thing with Faith Ringo. Faith Ringo is a
Yes.
quote artist. She's a painter, she
Yes.
draws and I gravitated towards her work like around like high school. And I was like, wow, like
I
her
know.
work is really, really amazing, to
And you
talk.
really, yeah,
Mhm.
and even with Faith Ringo, you really get to see her work in different mediums. So it
Right,
really even expands the idea of like how can you see Black womanhood? Can it be in a quilt? She made dolls, she made
right.
painting. So it is, I could see like that connection there. And even with Basquiat, him stepping outside of a canvas and painting on a wall and still
Mhm,
making using art as a tool rather than just kind of to talk about political issues rather than just being just for your personal expression. So it's
mhm,
definitely, I think art just plays a role in society that's just needed, where it just opens up the world to us in ways that we just never even thought about.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely, most definitely. Another artist is Jacob Lawrence, like, his
Yes.
work is very, very immaculate too, you
Yes, and
know
Romare Bearden from that
Mhm.
era, just
Yeah,
so yeah,
yeah,
and it
it's
was so
really, really amazing.
innovative.
Yeah, so innovative and creative and just not afraid to step outside the box, but also too not afraid to talk about social issues,
Mhm.
and I like how some artists now are like using their art to talk about social issues and
Yes.
things of that nature and talking about their culture. There's an artist I really liked and I gravitate towards him. His name is Paul Lewin and he
Mm.
lives in Miami and he does like these African based artworks, and it's really cool the just amount of detail that he does and he's
Mhm.
very much into complementary colors. I
Yeah.
really like, how he highlights dark-skinned black women.
Yes.
That's it's just really, really amazing to see that.
Yes, and just even using the elements of art to communicate. Like how you
Mhm,
said just now with just using the colors just to bring darker
mhm.
skin, making
Right.
it more beautiful. It's just
Yeah.
it's just interesting all around. I think that's even why I even got into teaching, just being able to use art as a language to
Mhm,
communicate
mhm.
in
Yeah,
a way that we
absolutely.
all can understand. So
Yeah, absolutely. I could totally agree with that. But I definitely want to switch gears and talk about
yeah.
that you attended MICA, which is the Maryland Institute College of Art. And I
Yeah.
wanted to really ask, like, what was that experience like going to art school, such as MICA? And what are some things that you've learned from going there?
Okay, so Micah was one of those schools that was heavily promoted at my performing arts school because it was
Mhm,
so accessible. So like
mhm,
they used to come to us. We used to go down to see them. So it was one of those art schools that I was really
mhm,
familiar with. And
mhm.
because it was not that far away, it was still within a community that I
Right.
still felt comfortable around. So I was still able to see myself,
Mhm.
even though it didn't look the same inside of that Michael bubble. So I
Right.
would say personally, like Michael was a culture shock for me. I did
Mhm.
not like I'm coming from seeing myself everywhere. Like my doctors were black, my teachers were black, and
Right.
even though I had like white teachers and things like that, they were in the minority. So it was just different. So
Right.
going from that to coming to Micah where it like most you didn't we didn't really have a lot of black teachers, which was different. So it was
Right.
hard to find that safety. And
Mhm.
the silver lining was that I was able to establish just a group of friends that we were
Right.
all black women and we just found community with each other that I'm really grateful
Right.
for. But it definitely MICA was worth it. I think that for somebody that was coming in, they definitely offered access. They offer
Mhm.
resources to help you grow. And I
Right.
think it just really opened up my mind politically because
Mhm.
living in like a bubble where
Right.
you realize that it doesn't look the same when
Right.
you step outside of it. So I
Uh-huh.
think for Micah, yeah, it was just a culture shock. And I had to really redefine like what was important to me and what was
Mhm.
willing to fight for. What topics was I willing to fight for? Because
Mhm.
even with the teachers that I had, they could offer when you're talking about techniques
Mhm.
and how to communicate
Right.
with the colors and things, they were helpful. I could help. They knew what to do. But when you're talking about topics that centers around out for people who are not a part of that community, it's hard to empathize, and it would also felt like I would always over explaining things, and
Right.
that's where things get tricky because
Right.
they're coming from their experience and what they
Mhm.
know. And if their perception of blackness is only through an artist like Kara Walker, which I love,
Mhm.
they're going to only want you to make work about black traumas. And if you didn't grow up in that, it
Right.
was always just like a push or pull.
Mhm.
So I love my experience, but I do hope that MICA is
Mhm.
making an effort to really diversify their staff and really, and I mean diversify beyond just race, just techniques and purpose
Right.
approach in art, just so the
Mhm.
next group of black students or brown, any like students of color in general, can see
Right.
themselves and find a place for them where they can really get like feedback for their work without being offended
Mhm.
or minimizing those things that are just important to them, because that was kind of that was an issue that I ran through a lot throughout my whole experience.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with a lot of these, like, with these universities, especially with the, school I went to in particular was SCAD, Savannah College of
Ah.
Art and Design in Georgia, Savannah,
Mhm.
Georgia, and the thing is, the same thing that what you were going through was the same thing was happening in my school. It was the lack of black, professors. There were some black professors there, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a lot, it was
Yeah.
mostly white, professors, and they
Mhm.
were they were really good professors, but of course, like how you said, there should be a supply of black professors that you can relate to in regards to experience, and you're not afraid to show or to tell your experience. So that's really the thing with that.
Yeah, especially when you're thinking about like disciplines. Like I'm not like, even though I was an illustrator, I would have fine arts major. So like
Mhm.
your perspective, your thoughts, like how you approach art is different. So even
Right.
though there was a wonderful illustrator, her name was Sadra Strickland, she was amazing
Right.
and she was super helpful. And I think she really did try to be that support for
Mhm.
black students, but she was an illustrator. So
Right.
I
Right.
needed a fine artist and someone that could really see it from that approach.
Right.
And I think that's where things just got tricky. That's why they needed to diversify and having just not just a illustrator, and like it needs to have a storyteller artist, an artist that performance artist, a black
Mhm.
fiber artist, like different artists that approaches art differently and tell different types of stories. So
Mhm.
we could really find those, really get good feedback based off of someone's experience that's more aligned with what you're trying to do with your
Mhm.
work.
Yeah,
So
yeah, especially not only with, like, the professors in regards to, like, just having black professors in different fields, like a black fiber professor and,
mhm,
black illustrator professor in different sectors, within profession, but
mhm.
also too, most definitely in regards to art history too, because
Yes. Yes.
in my when I went to, SCAD, it was majority Western white history in terms of
Yes.
artists. It
Mhm.
wasn't a lot of black artists that you learn, throughout history in regards to art.
Yes, and I will argue that because it's so limited, I think
Mhm.
just society, period. Like it just
Right.
limits the perspective of art in general. You don't really see art. It's everything for them, for society. They see art as an aesthetic, like something you can
Right.
put in your room. But when you
Mhm.
expand, like talking about art beyond Western art, especially when you're looking at indigenous cultures where
Right.
art doesn't look like make even though they use functional art and it
Mhm.
may not look the same, it may not be a painting, it may but it's not used the same in that way.
Right.
Like even when you're thinking about Faith Ringo, like we was talking about earlier,
Mhm.
and thinking beyond her and who taught her how to make quilts. When you talk about her mom, and then thinking about just the history of quilts in an African American culture, it was
Mhm.
also yes, it was art, but it was a means to document and also communicate. So when you're teaching it as art as a communication, art was used as a language. I don't know. I just think that it changes the whole conversation. And I
Right.
think that it's necessary just in general for even in a K-12 population. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. Because as of recently, also too, in terms of artists, I was learning about other like fashion designers, such as like Patrick
Mhm.
Kelly. And Patrick
Yes.
Kelly's work is amazing. I was
Mhm.
like, wow, like I just love how he expresses like the black experience from where he's from and what
Mhm.
he was going through. And he was saying, he was more accepted in Paris, in regards to just his work,
Yes.
than in New York. So, I like just hearing about stories of, Black people, especially with designers, in this
Mhm.
area and how much they've broken through and broke, barriers, especially with the late Anjan Talley. He's
Yeah.
such a huge inspiration to me. And,
Yeah.
this man was a scholar,
Yeah.
and it just,
Historians.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He went through a lot of stuff,
Mhm.
a lot of turmoil and things like that just to get to where he's at, and especially with him in his position, there was
Mhm.
people that was making more money than him under his
Yeah.
position of being editor at large.
Mhm. I know. Like it's they just I just think in
Mhm,
general, like it was just really like he should be taught. And he
mhm,
those that story should be told, especially
mhm.
when you have little designers in your classroom. If they see themselves, then it's different than the
Right.
idea. And then they would go beyond what he did because they saw themselves. There's a blueprint. It's a possibility now.
Mhm,
So yes, those types of artists, they all should be taught through and really revered as like how we revere other people in science and tech.
mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I can totally agree with that. Yeah, Anjan Talley, like just the amount of stuff that he knew,
mhm.
and especially like I said, being the editor at large at Vogue,
Mhm.
like his legacy lives on.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. But definitely, I want to talk about your artwork. I want to switch gears a little bit. I love your artwork. I love how fun it really like express like how you express yourself and your
Mhm.
experiences. So, how would you describe in regards to your artwork, like your art style? How would you describe it?
So my art style is ever evolving, but I would
Mhm,
describe it almost as black nostalgia.
mhm,
Um I like the idea of taking things and taking people that I know and just putting them in these like whimsical spaces where we can kind of really see them differently.
right.
So like a lot of the people that I've create like a lot of my characters that I create are actually based off of just people I know. And just thinking about them in a different way. So like for
Mhm,
me, I have a lot of grandmothers in my work
mhm,
because I've been around a lot of elder women. But
right,
I always see them as, like what if they were angels? They're like links
right,
between could we always talk about like a praying grandmother and how like when I always hear people say like, when they've been through things
right.
and got to the other side, they always say like if it hadn't been for my praying grandmother. So just seeing them as like
Mhm,
this link between like the ancestral realm
mhm,
and our and just this present world and just think
mhm,
about them as like these angels on earth. So I just wanted to depict that and show them
right,
as angels on earth. So I guess
mhm,
my style is like black nostalgia and just
right.
illustrative and whimsical. I wanted my work to bring joy.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really cool. Now, what are some like your favorite like mediums to work with in regards to doing your artwork, like paint or
Mhm.
digital? What type of mediums you like to work with?
I like all mediums, honestly. Like right now, I've enjoyed digital work, so that's been my main
Mhm,
thing. But I love collaging. I
mhm,
love the watercolor paint, And I'm looking, this year is my goal. I would love to expand beyond that to sculpture work. So
Mhm.
those are my main things right now, is digital collaging and digital art. But I love
Really
all
cool.
art forms. Any way to express myself.
Yeah, yeah, I'm into, like, digital and painting, I do nail art, so, you
Yes,
know
I love your style. It's like, to me, it reminds me of like George Clinton, Pedro Bell era. I love it.
Right. I love Pedro Bell. Like, Pedro Bell, his work was amazing. Because my dad
Yes.
told me about Pedro Bell, and he was like, "Have you heard of Pedro Bell?" I was like, "No." And I looked at his work. I was like, "Wow, like, this is amazing." He did a lot of the covers for Parliament Funkadelic, and he's one of my
Yes.
favorite bands.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean,
everybody like again, my dad was civil rights era. So he come of age in the 70s. So that was really like how I was only exposed, just through album covers and
yeah,
like art fairs and things like that. So I love him. I love how whimsical his style is. And it just makes
right.
me think of your work. So I love that his legacy is living on.
Yeah, yeah, like, it's really cool. I just love how, expressive, art can be, especially another artist
Hmm.
I like is, he's not black, but, another artist I really like is Keith Haring. I like a
Yes.
lot of his work. His work is amazing.
Yes, and it's so fun, but he's
Mhm.
talking about real things.
Right.
So it's just like it just makes you think about topics differently just by
Mhm.
how he just uses characters. So
Mhm.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I definitely wanna get into education. So what classes do you teach in regards to art education?
So right now I teach in DC.
Mhm.
I am a African American culture and creative arts teacher.
Mhm.
So in this at this school that I work at, I teach first grade through fourth grade, and basically
Mhm.
my focus is to use art as a means to teach history.
Mhm.
So we make, African masks, we make, but they're making their own masks while we're studying different types
Mhm.
of masks and how they've been used. So we go all the way back to looking at different cultures, and then we talk about Picasso. And then when
Mhm.
I had older students, because I've taught kindergarten all the way to eighth grade.
Mhm.
So when I had older students, we would talk more about like what's cultural appropriation. Do you believe that Pablo Picasso should have used art in this way? And then it becomes more of a
Mhm.
discussion. So I teach that, but mainly I really teach my students that art is just a language. And it's a
Mhm.
language that you understand because you've been looking at art longer than you've been able to write.
Mhm.
So it's just been more so like that type of class for me, and I really
Mhm.
enjoyed it, and they enjoy it, hopefully.
Mhm. Yeah, I find it so interesting how you mentioned Pablo Picasso because, I was, doing research in regards to Pablo Picasso and his artwork, and he was very influenced by African art. He
Very.
would collect like African, sculptures and things like that, and other artists too of that Cubism era. George
Yes.
Brock, the same thing.
Hmm.
Very inspired by African art.
Yes, but traditionally when we have taught it to students, they
Mhm.
stop right there, right at Cubism, where there's a history that led into Cubism,
Right.
and that opens up for students, especially Black students, where
Mhm.
now, like, there, it's always been a thing. Even now, when we look at society, how cultures have been influenced by Black
Mhm.
people since the beginning. So
Mhm.
even though these are the artists, especially when you talk about at the end, when you talk about how much these paintings go for,
Right.
and like you look at it that way, and how like it's just have he's pretty much been considered almost like the father of modern art. And then you're looking at these African artifacts. It's
Right.
almost a pride for the students because this is a part of who you are. But it's also like, why haven't Black artists been recognized for using
Right.
those types of styles? Especially when you're looking at when I showed them that, and then I'll show them African art and Lois Maylou Jones's painting, which was
Right.
happening at the same time. But she had
Mhm.
to change her name to even get into galleries. So
Mm.
then it becomes this discussion, and then it's a bigger story there. And I know that kids, they love stories, and this
Mhm.
is a way that they can really see value and
Right.
retaining what we've learned. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, exactly. But I definitely want to get into the process in regards to your artwork. Like, what is your process in regards to making a piece of artwork? Do you start with thumbnails and then you get to color? Or, like, what's your process?
So for me, it's more sketching.
Mhm.
I just kind of let these people come to me, and then I start to think more about like themes. So then that's when I start to actually research,
Right.
because I'm looking at like a lot of times I use my own family photos to implement, to add into my own pieces. So my process usually
Mhm.
starts from just a simple sketch and
Mhm.
thinking about a person or in
Mhm.
a memory,
Mhm.
and just building from there.
Mhm.
This most recent piece, my sister's getting ready to have a child, so we were just really excited. So this made me think about my mom as a grandmother,
Right.
and I thought about how like I can think like what my grandmother was like. And I know that
Right.
we watched, I know my grandmother and my mom, both of them were big stories. They watched soap
Mhm.
operas. So I wanted to just show her in this light of,
Right.
you know, what we grew up with, where we
Mhm.
had, you know, we was sitting next to our grandmother watching soap opera. Well, my sister grew up watching soap operas with my mom. So it
Mhm.
showed like this almost this interpretation of her child, that story, that tradition being passed on, just was
Mhm.
kind of the inspiration. So I use
Mhm.
photos from Young and the Restless, because that's literally what we watch. Um, um, I use pictures, you know, family photos of just women in our
Mhm.
lives at that time. And it's just,
Right.
and I use the warm colors because I think of
Mhm.
her, because she always, um, in her interiors, always use a lot of reds, and
Mhm.
she has red hair. So it was just all of it. And then with the, because he's not born yet, my nephew, I decided to use his sign, and he'll be a Taurus. So I started
Mhm.
using these bull as a symbol for him.
Right.
So it's just, I just take different things and just make one, you know, image to represent just my feeling. I just, the feeling was
Mhm.
just excitement, and just getting ready, excited to see my mom become a grandmother and what that may
Mhm.
look like for us.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. But I definitely want to go ahead and talk about in regards to the evolution of art. What's your take on how art has evolved, especially just in regards to, we live in an era of social media.
Hmm.
What's your take on the evolution of art, especially where it's going, especially involving like AI? I don't know how much you
Yeah.
know about that, but AI is growing. It's getting more popular.
I think art it's just in cycles. I think we're
Mhm.
getting ready to hit a cycle of life where things are it's been so much technology around
Mhm.
art that people crave tangible things. So I
Right.
think that the AI thing, I think we're just hitting a peak of how technology can be used as art.
Right.
And we're now seeing like, okay, this may pose some problems for us. And
Mhm.
I think that now we're having bigger conversations even about gatekeeping, and
Right.
how like, because we're at a point, because the AI is pretty much taking art out of the hands of artists and
Right.
making it more just accessible with technology. But we kind of saw this coming even with streaming. I argue like
Mhm.
lost media is a part of art.
Mhm.
It's just a part of the art conversation. We need to be able to, art has to be tangible. We have to
Right.
be able to hold it. And it only people that can, and we also have to use it as a means to express ourselves. And if it's being standardized, and if it's being something that you can just create a prompt for, then you're
Mhm.
taking the soul out of it. So
Right.
it's not, so I just see it as AI art, it's a threat, but I also see it as it's gonna breed a renaissance. And I
Mhm.
also, where people are gonna be going back to painting and making
Mhm.
sculptures, and people are gonna want it again because it's so
Right.
easy to, just
Right.
write a prompt. And if you know anything about this society, that they don't like things that everybody can have. So
Right.
I see it as a renaissance coming after this. I think we're hitting a peak where now artists are getting, and people are starting to see it as
Mhm.
a problem, technology really.
Mhm.
And there's gonna be, I don't know, I just think there's gonna be a renaissance that's gonna come out of it. So it's just
Mhm.
gonna be interesting. Just even I see people gonna buy CDs again. I think a lot of things are gonna change because
Mhm.
technology has just taken over, and we're
Mhm.
losing things because of it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I find it very interesting because, I do agree to a degree we're losing the tangibility
Mm-hmm.
of art, you know what I mean? And, especially with AI, it can never replace authenticity or human creativity. As much,
Agreed.
no matter how advanced it'll get, because of
Mm-hmm.
course it's going to get more advanced. And the thing is also too, like with, Chat GPT, which is one of the
Mm-hmm.
platforms of AI, and you give it a prompt and
Yeah.
it'll give you like, say for instance, if you want to, learn how to, cook like mashed potatoes and bananas, it'll give you a whole recipe, like different recipes of how to use potatoes
Yeah.
and how to use mashed potatoes and bananas. It'd be
Right.
kind of not good, but
And I even see like I saw this is Twitter, but I saw like professors talking about how students have been using AI just to write papers and how obvious it is because it takes the soul out of it. Like you have a
Mhm,
voice when you write, you have a language, you have a footprint when you do things. So when you
mhm,
just put it in a machine, it just loses its soul, like you said, and authentic. And it's just gonna know, and people are gonna
mhm,
know. Like when you're looking at all of these AI pieces, art pieces that've been coming out, they're
right,
nice, but they look the same. They all
mhm,
look there's only 5 aesthetics that are being breeded out of this style. I feel bad for the artist that's their style,
yeah, concept art,
but
yeah,
people are not going to want that after a while. I really do believe that there's going to be a whole like a renaissance where people are just not going to even want those pieces anymore. It's new right now, and I think
mhm,
that's why it's an attraction, but it's just like social media where we all were on MySpace until Facebook
mhm,
came, and then
right,
MySpace wasn't cool anymore. So
right.
so yeah.
Yeah, it's just a whole thing of just like things are just coming and going. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like how you said, just with art, it's like a cycle, and things like that, especially with the beauty, especially with the nail industry specifically, where,
Mhm.
trends will die down for a second and it'll come
Mhm.
back, die down for a second, come back. So it's an ongoing cycle.
Because even when you're looking at animation, another one, another art form, you
Right.
notice that there's been a uptick of stop motion again. Like
Hmm.
there's been a lot of stop motion art films coming out, but
Right.
up until that point, when I was at MICA, everybody only drew in like Steven Universe style. They only
Right.
used that Steven in illustration. So I just,
Hmm.
but that was within like maybe 7 to 10 years. You're seeing
Hmm.
these different changes. So I just think, like you said, it's just going to be interesting seeing what happens, but I
Right.
do worry for like artists that have to use technology, like filmmakers and
Hmm.
those types of art and photographers and artists that really are digital artists,
Hmm.
because this popcorn culture that's also being breeded with technology where everything is so fast, they're not really allowing room for development and growth.
Hmm.
Everything is just about consumer and what can get help you survive right away,
Hmm.
versus like how can you be like what's means something to you, and
Hmm.
how that style can just be born out of that. So
Right.
it's just, I think, more concerned about those types of artists rather than people,
Hmm.
whether it replaces artists, because AI is not going to replace a ceramist,
Hmm.
but it's just the overall fear of that. Just that's the main thing.
Hmm. Yeah. But I want to go ahead and ask, like, in 5 years, what do you think your future will look like in 5 years? Like, what's next for you?
I guess for me, in 5 years, I would love for my art to be my center, my
Mhm,
practice to be more my focus, which right now is a little challenging because I'm back in school and
mhm,
I'm teaching. And
right,
teaching, you have to be present. So, but
mhm,
I would love to see my work just evolve. I believe that my work fits best in
right,
homes and it's something that could be passed down. So I
mhm,
would love to do more like art around that and just, make it more available to people so they can have it in their homes. So
mhm,
generations from now, they're looking at they're talking about their lives. They say, I remember my mom had this painting or had this cookie jar
right,
in the house and it looked
mhm,
like this. I wonder who was the artist behind that. And then,
right,
So that's how I envision my next couple of years, my next steps.
That's really amazing. Last but not least, where can people find you on social media and how can people support your work?
Okay. You can find me at KB the artist or KBDA artist. That's where you can find my linktree. You will find my where you can find if you want to purchase some art from me. They're available on Society 6. I also put out I illustrated a book called Being Different is Great. So if you want to find that on Lulu, it's available. And the author Alexis Stewart, she has a page, so you can find it on there. Real Lifestyle, I believe it's Real Lifestyle. It's on my link tree, and that's available. So that's the best place you can find me.
All right.
Or
Well,
you can
thank you.
see me in the classroom in DC.
Well, thank you so much, KB, for jumping onto the show. This is absolutely a really cool conversation talking about
Yes,
art and where art is going. So, yeah, I really
yes,
enjoy your work as well. Your work is very women's school, very fun. And I love how it tells a story, about the Black experience. So, it's really, really cool. So, thank you so
yes.
much.
Thank you. This was exciting. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to click the bell for notifications. Also, follow me on my social media platforms and visit my website, ASIATHABIRD.com, and be on the lookout for more interviews to come very soon. Take care and stay beautiful.